Hi, everybody. My name's Kelsey. I'm a product marketing manager with AppFire, who's a sponsor at JiraCon. Today, we're going to talk about planning and executing a Jira migration. Migration is a really hot topic in the ecosystem right now, and this talk will be useful whether you're migrating from server to data center or to cloud. So I'll share some guidance and best practices and show a demo of one of our products closer to the end, and then we'll have an opportunity for you to ask questions as well. All right, let's jump in. So first, a little bit about AppFire for those that may not be familiar. We've been in business for almost 16 years, and to date we have 450 awesome colleagues all over the world. We're in over 20 countries, so it's really exciting to be part of such a global team. Back in the day, our business was wholly focused on providing services in the Atlassian ecosystem. And then over time, we've grown our portfolio of apps. And so today we have 195 apps across 8 different solution areas in the marketplace. So if you use Jira or Confluence, you likely have one of our apps or are familiar with some of our apps, which we'll talk a little bit more about today. But what makes us qualified to talk about migrations in particular, you might ask? Within AppFire, we have over 8 years of migration experience. In that time, we've provided both services and apps to support migrations, merges, and consolidations for companies all over the world. And we've done it with a track record of 0 data loss. So we know exactly what risks and considerations go into a migration. And we've built one of our apps, Configuration Manager for Jira, to make tackling those challenges easy. So for our talk today, we'll start by examining the migration options and how to make important migration decisions. Then we'll discuss the different migration phases at a high level. And I'll talk about what's in our migration ebook that we created in collaboration with Rachel Wright. So yeah, we're going to talk about server decommission today, as well as migration options and process. We'll talk about our migration guide, some apps you can use to help you with migration, as well as we'll go into a demo of Configuration Manager for Jira. All right, so first, why are we talking about migrating off of Jira Server? As you've probably heard, Atlassian stopped selling server licenses in February of this year, and support for server ends in 3 years' time in 2024. So if you're an organization that has Jira at your company, Jira Server, you'll need to either switch to data center, migrate to Atlassian hosted cloud products, or make alternate plans. So how do you choose between deployment options? There's no one correct answer for everyone. The answer depends on factors like the future plan for software at your organization, how complex your configuration is today, how many users you have, the level of in-house administrative expertise, and if you have any special data residency, compliance, or industry regulations. All of these factors are super important, and some of them are non-negotiable when it comes to selecting either data center or cloud. So I recommend taking the quiz linked at the URL shown here. It's a 21-question quiz, and that will help you understand the key considerations for your company and make a recommendation on either moving to data center or cloud, or perhaps a combination of the two. So when you're migrating, you have some options to think through that will impact how you execute, and we'll talk about those next. And just a heads up, we're going to cover a lot today, but don't feel like you need to furiously take notes. All of the guidance I'm sharing is covered in our migrations ebook, which you can download for free at the link here. And there'll be links to that ebook throughout the presentation, so don't worry if you miss it. And before I get too into the weeds, I wanted to take a moment to share this quote from Dale Carnegie, who was an American author and professional speaker. He says that an hour of planning can save you 10 hours of doing. And those familiar with migration projects know that this is especially true for migration projects. If you lead with a let's just migrate, it's easy mindset, that can often mean you're leaving important stakeholders behind. It can mean data loss or messy data, extra downtime for users, and lots of frustration and redoing of work. So I recommend spending the time to plan now. It will pay off immensely down the line, and you'll end up with much happier users and executives. All right, let's talk about full versus partial migrations of data, because you don't necessarily need or want to migrate everything. Think about, do you need to migrate inactive projects? How about custom field data used by expired apps? Maybe there are old bugs that you truly won't ever get around to fixing. The truth is there's probably a lot of cleanup you can do as part of the migration project and process, which will result in less mess for users to wade through post-migration. So take advantage of this opportunity to migrate as an opportunity to clean up your instance. And regardless of which path you choose, decide whether you need to migrate all of your data or just some of it. You can also limit the scope of data you need to migrate by scrutinizing everything in your instance. Determine if it really needs to be in the target, and this will make your migration easier. You'll probably want to migrate some amount of projects, but think through if all of those are needed. So consider excluding projects that have gone unused for several months, right? There's no use in having those in your new instance if they've gone unused in your current instance. You can also exclude issues that are not likely to be addressed. Take a look at the user base to see if scope can be limited there. For example, you probably don't need to migrate data from users who left the company years ago. You can also remove unused apps, schemes, or settings, or ask users to remove any old filters, filter subscriptions, boards, and dashboards. And then you'll want to fix any known problems like broken configurations, webhooks, and other settings before you migrate. You want to get the source application into the cleanest state possible before migrating, and that will make everything easier. And finally, say there are things you're not ready to get rid of completely. It's totally understandable. Consider exporting some of that to a long-term storage location and then removing it from Jira. You have several options when it comes to how you export old data, and each of these have their pros and cons. And again, we've provided guidance on some of those pros and cons and your options here in our ebook. So I recommend taking a look at that. But that's a great way to clean up your instance before migrating. All right, so now that we've talked a little bit about scope of your migration, we'll talk a little bit about the process and how you can actually migrate in phases, if that makes sense for your organization. So phased migration might be for you if, for example, not all the departments at your company are ready to migrate at one time. Maybe you have groups that are in the middle of a time-sensitive project, or key stakeholders are away and not available till next quarter, something like that. Or perhaps you use some apps on server that are not yet compatible with the target application you're moving to, either data center or cloud. So that might be a reason to migrate some groups now and other groups at a later time. Of course, yep, this method has its pros and cons. You'll have multiple mini migrations if you go with the phased approach. And overall, that migration timeline is longer, but it does give you a great deal of timing flexibility and the ability to, at least get started on some of the migration. Consolidation is another topic, and so consolidation, what we mean here is if your organization has many Jira applications, this happens quite frequently, happens a lot. Sometimes you have an official Jira application and an unofficial one that People at the company are well accustomed to using both of those in their day-to-day work. So you might want to think about consolidating as part of this migration project. Or maybe you have a public application and an internal one, or perhaps you recently went through a merge with another company and each company brought their own Jira instances to the table. So when this is, if this applies to you, then you'll need multiple migration events. And the order in which you do these migration events will have a huge impact on the end result. So as part of your planning process, you'll want to think through these questions to determine your plan of attack. Some of the questions are, what's the long-term strategy for the entire organization? Is it cloud or data center or some combination of those hosting types? How many Jira applications are there and which deployment types are they in currently? How is each application used and who are the stakeholders of each? How many users are on each application? How large is each application? And which apps, integrations, or customizations exist? So you'll kind of want to take inventory here of each of these different applications that your company uses to determine the best method of consolidation before starting your migration project. Another option to consider is starting fresh rather than spending time and money fixing what you have. So I know it's probably every admin's dream to, it's like buying a brand new car rather than fixing your old junker. It's like, can't we just start fresh in the new instance? Wouldn't that be amazing? So yes, this does make sense for some companies. Consider starting fresh when your application requires multiple upgrades to catch up to the latest version, when you have recurring performance or instability issues, or when there's a lot of old data that's no longer needed. And like with anything else, this has its pros and cons. The pros are probably really easy to think of here. You get to start from a clean state, remove years worth of problems from your old instance. But the cons here are potentially, business interruption, some more downtime. People may be resistant to change for fear of the unknown. And then, loss of access to old data. So definitely some things to think through here, but is an option that makes sense for some organizations. Okay, so now let's go into the process at a high level. Again, all of this info is included in the migration ebook, which is linked throughout the presentation. So don't worry about writing everything down. The biggest migration mistake that people make is thinking that it's an easy process. People think they can just simply pick up their data and move it maybe over a weekend or an evening and problem solved. It's up and running the next day, right? Wrong. Application settings are usually more complex than you think, and there are probably some settings you forgot about or didn't know existed. So you need to kind of plan your migration and dedicate time and effort to it like you would any other major company strategic initiative. So following this process will help you ensure that you don't miss a beat. Before you start the migration process, identify who your stakeholders are, how they're affected, what each needs to know, and any specific actions they need to take during this process. You may also need to get buy-in and convince one or more groups that migration is even needed. You may have to get approval or submit a formal proposal to start the work. So make sure you look at your company processes, or there may be an approval process or signatures required at each stage. And of course, you'll need to think about how you're going to track the progress. So which tools and people can you involve in tracking and managing the migration project? In the prep stage, you should identify steps to complete before, during, and after the migration. We recommend using a checklist here, and there's a 73-step checklist in our ebook. So that is a pretty exhaustive list that we're confident covers most of what you'll need. Next, you'll want to take inventory of your current configuration. So do an assessment, figure out some of those key factors that we talked about in the beginning. And then you'll want to make sure you back up, clean up, and archive any data that doesn't belong in your new instance. Next, it's time to conduct a test migration. So we don't want to just move everything to the cloud production site right away. We want to make sure we test in a sandbox environment. And that'll help us understand how much time the migration takes, how much downtime to expect, whether there are any data collisions or complexities to address, and whether all data transferred as desired. So be prepared to test the migration more than once and don't migrate to production until everything's perfect. And then when it's finally time to migrate to production, prepare your users so they know what changes to expect. Just before starting the final migration, you'll also want to freeze your configuration to prevent changes to the source. And then, like, otherwise changes made by users in the source might create new conflicts, invalidate test cases, or cause unintended results. And then you'll execute your launch plan. Make sure you communicate your progress to key stakeholders along the way, and you're updating your project plan as you go. And then once the migration is complete, you'll have a few housekeeping items that you'll want to make sure get done. So things like resetting your test environment so it's ready for future efforts like vetting third-party apps, any major configuration changes, or periodic cleanup efforts. And you may need to create or revisit your backup, disaster recovery, and archive strategies. And of course, you'll probably need to do some amount of training, helping your users understand what processes and features are different in the new hosting type compared to what they're used to in Jira Server. All right, so how do you do all of that? As I've mentioned throughout this presentation, this was, just a high-level look at the process, and we have a resource that will help you stay on track and be something that you can reference throughout your planning, executing, and post-migration activities. So we created this book in partnership with Rachel Wright, who's the author of the Jira Strategy Admin Workbook. And she's an Atlassian community champion. She's great. If you don't know Rachel, I highly recommend reaching out to her on LinkedIn and seeing all the resources that she has available. But yeah, the Ultimate Guide to Jira Migrations is a resource available to you for free. It includes best practices for planning your migration, practical tips for preparing, executing, and testing, that 73-step checklist that I mentioned, 16 customizable worksheets that you can download and make use for your organization. They're completely editable and customizable. There's that quiz for determining the best deployment method for your situation. And of course, our expert advice and Rachel's expert advice throughout. This book is for everybody from Jira admins and project managers to leaders and executives to systems and database admins and test team members. It's a master resource to answer all of your migration questions and help you plan every step of the process. And like I said, you can get your free download at the link shown. All right, so now let's talk about some helper apps. So you're not alone when it comes to migration. There are a few apps on the marketplace that may be able to help you with this process. The Jira Cloud Migration Assistant is one that you probably may have heard of. It's a free app created by Atlassian to support customers in on-premise to cloud migrations. It's still being developed, but works well for small-scale migration efforts. It does not yet support Jira Service Management, and moving app data is currently in EAP. There's also the Jira Site Import tool. This tool supports all project types, including Jira Service Management. It's the best method if you're wanting to move all of your data to cloud, because you can't pick and choose specific projects to migrate. Also know that it will overwrite any existing data you already have in your cloud instance. So if you're already using that cloud instance, it's going to overwrite existing projects that you may have there. The CSV import method is the easiest, but know that it only imports selected issue, and field data. All your other configurations will be left behind. The Jira Data Center Migration app is for those migrating from server to data center, but pay attention here as there are very specific system requirements for using this app. So make sure you look at the marketplace listing for that app. And then finally, my favorite migration app is Configuration Manager for Jira. So this app is currently available for server and data center, and the cloud release is coming very soon, which I'll talk more about in a moment. But this app is useful if you're migrating from Jira server to data center, or if you have some consolidations between different on-premise instances that need to happen prior to migrating. You can do that with CMJ. It's also useful for automating administrative tasks and managing changes in Jira on a regular basis. So it's a great tool. Some of the things that make it awesome for migrations are the advanced integrity check feature. So you may be familiar with Jira's native integrity checker. This one's a little bit more advanced. It'll help you find and fix configuration errors before you migrate, so you don't deploy them to your target. One moment, I see I have a chat in Zoom. Oh yes, click on the Q&A icon on the left if you have any questions throughout the presentation. All right, okay. So Configuration Manager also performs a detailed analysis of all third-party app dependencies and versions, so you know exactly which apps will migrate and what's not supported. There's a deep change analysis of all added, updated, or removed objects. So as you're planning and preparing for your migration, this analysis will help you understand whether things are going to be added, modified, or removed from your target. There's also an impact analysis feature, which helps you understand how those proposed changes impact the projects and configurations that are already in your target. So you can review these and make any modifications before actually pressing the migrate button. You can migrate or merge single projects, multiple projects, or entire applications. So there's those 3 different deployment modes available, which is really helpful for people that may be migrating in phases. And it's incredibly safe when it comes to preventing data loss. So if any errors are encountered as you're migrating, all of the previously applied changes will be rolled back and the Jira configuration will be restored to its initial state. Also, any and all of your changes are logged in the audit log, so you can see exactly what actions occurred and when. And finally, many of the most popular marketplace apps are integrated with CMJ through what we call our apps SPI technology. So if there's an apps SPI integration built by another marketplace vendor, then that means CMJ will be able to migrate the data and configurations from those apps as well. Okay, so as I mentioned, Configuration Manager for Jira is available now to support server to data center migrations, and it's also just an incredible tool for managing configuration changes and maintaining a healthy, clean instance on a regular basis. You can find more information in our documentation about all the wonderful ways to use CMJ, and I highly recommend checking it out and doing a product trial. We're also super close to releasing the cloud version of CMJ, which in its initial release will support migrations from server to cloud for Jira Core and Jira Software projects. So I have a demo video that I want to share, and then we'll wrap it up and open it up for questions. So without further ado, give me a moment to reshare so I can share my computer audio. Introducing Configuration Manager for Jira Cloud. CMJ Cloud combines with the Cloud Migration Tool, available for free, to perform migrations from Jira Core on server to Jira Cloud. This solution provides a seamless migration experience of Jira projects and settings at scale. Here's how it works. You'll need administrators' permissions to get started. Visit the Marketplace or Manage Apps within Jira to install the Configuration Manager Cloud Migration tool on your Origin on-prem instance and Configuration Manager for Jira Cloud on your destination cloud site. Once that's done, you're ready to connect the two and begin your migration. First, head to the Admin Settings menu on your Origin on-prem instance and select Configuration Manager. Here's the first page. This tab shows you're in Configuration Manager. You can see in the dashboard view how many projects and issues in your server instance you've migrated, started to, or have yet to migrate. You can also see how much time it took to complete your last migration. You can manage migrations that you may have already started through the main page here, or choose to start a new migration of other projects. The Welcome page gives an overview of the migration process. If you need more depth, the documentation is easily accessible here. Click Start Migration and the wizard will guide us through. Name your migration to tell it apart from others you may be working on. Then select New Connection or an existing cloud connection from the list to specify which cloud site you want to move projects to in this phase. If you're establishing a new connection, enter a name and the URL for that cloud site. Then enter your system admin email address and an API token. The app uses the API token as a means of verifying your administrator credentials and accessing Jira Cloud services without asking for or storing an admin password. You can generate an API token easily by going to the security section of your Atlassian account. Test your connection to verify it works, and then you're ready to start migrations to the cloud. Click Select to begin adding projects to your migration. Let's add CMJ 100, a sample project with 100 issues in it. Okay. So now we're in the analysis phase. This is where the magic happens. CMJ is looking under the hood and setting everything up to be migrated, analyzing the local configurations, and looking for any red flags or warnings to report to the user. Analysis done. Here we see the analysis of the types of configurations being packaged for migration, giving users the chance to review, resolve errors, and analyze the impact of each change so you can prevent broken configurations from making their way to the cloud. The Projects and Configuration tabs let you have a more detailed view of what's inside the migration. Any errors, like this one about project keys, will show up here. Okay, 3 steps done, just 1 more to go. Let's migrate. You can close the screen if you want to and come back to it later. Just click back into it when you're ready. In the meantime, grab a coffee or walk your dog. So now it's done. We see a summary of the migration here. Let's go back and check our destination cloud instance to verify everything moved over. Select View Projects, and there's our migrated project. And here are all the issues, their statuses, users, comments, and attachments, everything extracted, exported, and moved over with full data integrity. For both simple or complex Jira configurations, thousands of customers have already placed their trust in Configuration Manager for Jira for on-premise migrations. Go ahead and give the Cloud Migration tool and CMJ Cloud a try for your next cloud migration. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to our world-class support team at any time. All right, so with that, I'd like to open it up for questions. And then also on the slide is helpful links from today's presentation if you didn't get a chance to copy those earlier.
Hi, Kelsey. This was a great session. So we have a lot of questions.
Great.
Yeah. Erica asked, what team members' roles should be part of the migration project team?
What team members' roles
should be part of the migration project team?
So like which stakeholders from your organization?
Yes.
Yeah. I'd recommend checking the ebook for that. There's probably a whole list of potential stakeholders that you might want to include, and the worksheets as well will kind of let you list those out and what each of them needs to know.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's probably a case by case basis to answer your question.
Great. So another question, if a user is active in source and inactive in target, how will CMG behave?
That's a great question. I might have to take that one offline. I think that probably the way that CMJ works is when you're deploying your snapshot or your proposed configuration to the target, the app takes a look at the source and the target and then elevates any differences to the user. So I think in that case, it would probably give you a warning or something like that that says this user is not active in the target, you know, and just notifying the user. I don't know that any changes would necessarily be made, but yeah, I think it would notify you.
Okay. So another question with some upvotes. Is there any enhancement or limitation of migrating projects with attachments above 100 megabyte file? So it's basically if is there any enhancements with large with projects with large attachments?
I don't know if there would be any enhancements. The tool does migrate attachments. I have to check with our support team to see what the size limitation is, but yeah, attachments are included in the scope of what's migrated.
Okay. Another CMG question. Does CMG migrate dashboards and filters? Does it address the ones that cannot be migrated through JCMA?
So for the CMJ Cloud tool, yes, the answer is yes for the server and data center app that's available today. For cloud, support for dashboards and filters is coming in a future release very soon. So we have 1.0 coming this month, and but dashboards and filters are not yet included in that 1.0 release, but they're planned for the following release after that. So very soon, the team is working hard on that.
Great news.
Yeah.
Another question. How to take care of group user mapping via configuration manager as groups are migrated without users?
That's a great question. Let me check my documentation here real quick. I believe, yeah, group membership is not transferred to the cloud.
Okay. Is CMJ Cloud available now? If not, when do you expect it?
Yep. So within the month, we're getting really, really close, but we don't want to release it before it's ready. But I feel confident saying this month.
Oh, good news.
Yeah.
So one last question. Is deploy configuration snapshot used to analyze what data gets migrated via JCMA? So
the snapshot technology is like specific to configuration manager for Jira. I think the JCMA technology is a little bit different. Is that the question? Can you repeat the question again?
Is deploy configuration snapshot used to analyze what data gets migrated via JCMA?
So I think the question is like if you migrated some data with JCMA and then you use CMJ, would it see those configurations that were deployed with JCMA? The answer is yes to that. I don't know if that was the exact question, but yeah, so the app will compare what's on your source versus what's in the target. So if you previously used JCMA, those configurations would be seen when you use CMJ Cloud.
Okay, so this was the last question.
Okay, awesome. Well, I think this next slide kind of closes us out here. I really want to thank you guys for attending and participating. I'd love to take more questions through our virtual booth. I'll be there the rest of the JiraCon session today till 3 p.m. So if you have any specific topics you want to discuss, I'll be there. You can also send me an email. My email is provided on that slide. And you can also chat with any of the other AppFire speakers through that virtual booth. They will be there as well. So I think it's break time. Take a look at the next few sessions that are coming up. There's a lot of great content out there. And yeah, have a great JiraCon, everybody. Thank you.